Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Elseworlds Exchange. I'm Sal, and I'm joined today by Uber artist Sean Gordon Murphy. Sean, thanks so much for being on the show today.
Thanks for having me, Sal. It's good to see you again, buddy.
It's my pleasure. Same to you. By the way, congrats on the new indie book.
No, thanks, man.
Of course.
Yeah, we just went off to print. I think people will have their copies in maybe 2 months. I think we're all doing it. We're doing it domestically, so we don't have to wait for anything from China or any boats getting stuck in the Suez Canal, which is nice.
Yes, which has been an issue for quite a few independent creators. But today we're going to talk all about Batman, specifically the Batman animated series. This idea came to me thanks to my better half, who was like, we just were talking about Batman the animated series for a good half hour before she was like, "This is a show," and I'm like, "Yeah, it is a show. Yeah. We should just talk about it. The influence of the animated series on fandom and how it's like." This show comes out of nowhere in an ocean of terrible cartoons, and not only does it blow people's minds, and it is a great Batman show, but it also is such a perfect distillation of the character and the universe, and that influence on everything else kind of permeated even today. We're talking 20 years later, so
yeah. I mean, I remember as a kid when I saw it. I was raised on He-Man and G.I. Joe and Transformers.
Yeah,
and nothing against those cartoons. Some of them don't hold up very well.
No.
When I saw the animated series, even my 12-year-old brain was like, "This is different."
Yes.
There's something about the writing here that's it's not leaving me. Like I would go to school the next day thinking about how Batman showed a criminal some kindness or something. The way something was written, I'm just like, "What am I getting?" And as a 12-year-old, you don't even know what this isn't. I know it's as good as He-Man, but there's something even better, I think.
Yeah. Depth.
Depth. Yeah. Nuance.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. The kind of subtlety that is just intrinsic in every episode. Even, there are so few, but the kind of silly ones, like I've got a Batman in my basement. Like even that one has some kind of value to it.
I stand by that one, man. I mean, that episode, it's funny. I was talking to a friend about that one. If you redid that in a horror way, and you had these kids fighting Killer Croc, and he was in their treehouse, that could be a really amazing episode. And I still like it the way they did it. But yeah, even a quote unquote bad episode is still pretty good.
Yeah, I completely agree. So my question to you is, do you remember what your first episode was?
No, but I remember being confused by the credits because I thought the credits were the opening scene.
Yeah. So
I watched it on Fox after school, and I'm like, "Oh man, this is the new Batman." And I was never, other than the Michael Keaton, I wasn't really a Batman fan. And I remember thinking "Oh, these guys are robbing a bank, and the car's taking off, and this looks really good, and it's different animation than what I'm used to."
Totally.
And then the next day, I try to watch it again, and the same credits are on, and I'm like, "Oh, they're playing the same episode. That's stupid." So I skipped it, and I quickly figured out that's just the opening credit scene.
Nice. Yeah, because the opening credits is a whole little episode, which of course it has its own history of it. I think it was an adaptation of the animatic that they used to pitch the show in the first place. So it's it is a little, no credits, no words. You don't even see the title. It doesn't even show you. It doesn't even say Batman because it's just you get it. You know who it is. You know who that. You're not going to be "Oh, who's that guy?"
Yeah. Do you remember your first episode?
I really do. I don't remember it. But I definitely caught it, while it was happening, while it was actually airing. I remember rushing home from school and watching the show, and I feel like it might have been Christmas with the Joker.
Okay, so that might have been the first one.
That's what I'm. Yeah, but that might have been Inception. That might have been just cultural Inception of the first one is actually supposed to be on Leather Wings, but the first aired episode, so that might have been just me kind of being incepted by the culture, but. God.
Right.
Yeah. So
it's interesting. Yeah. It's interesting. I was just gonna say it's interesting because that's before I was online. Most people weren't on the internet yet, and the only way I knew it was on was my mom would tell me on the TV guide. I didn't know. I didn't know that they took a 3-year hiatus to do the season 4 or whatever.
Oh.
I always remember watching the new Adventures of Batman and Robin, and the animation style changed. I was like, "What is going on?" It's the same, but it's different.
Yes.
And it didn't even register to me that 2 or 3 years had passed because you're a kid. You're just watching reruns. You don't ever think
this is new. This is a repeat.
Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah. Man, I was just thinking about the New Adventures because I'm like, yeah, because the New Adventures changes the theme, the intro, and the animation gets. It's more like for me there were like 3 distinct styles for the animated series, particularly the first 2-3 seasons, which is like the triple A. Then there was the like mid tier, which is still excellent compared to any other show on TV at the time, and then there was like the B tier, and I don't know what the B squad, where it's like, oh, it's a B squad episode, where you're like, oh man, the worst was when they did a 2-parter, and you're like, A tier did part 1, and then B tier did part 2, and you're like, no, like It's
funny with the Two-Face 2-parter, they used the A team on the second one, and they had like some great animation on Clayface, and there was even like this somersault that Batman did, and the way that they animate Clayface, like. He hits a wall, and then his feet become his head, and he like switches place, and you could tell that they saved their budget for. I think that might be Ghibli Studios in Japan, or they eventually used one of those guys. I know they probably used a handful of them, but one of the studios always stands out to me. I'm like, oh, they draw Batman with a tiny nose, and his mouth is up here, and he has a giant chin.
Yeah,
but somehow it looks good.
Right. Exactly, and that's one of the that's one of those things where it's like just the design element alone on everybody gives you this idea of every character, and you're like, like it's one of those effortless seeming moments where you're like, oh right, like that's what he's supposed to look like, that's what Clayface looks like. When in reality, Clayface never looked like that. Like at any point in the comics, Mr. Freeze, it's like an homage to his his old red suit. I don't even want to waste time talking about the Mr. Freeze element because everybody uses that as the example, right? Like, nobody cared about Mr. Freeze, the origin, Emmy award-winning show, blah blah blah. But the influence of that on everything else is kind of the remarkable thing about the show, because it could have just been one of those things, because there are a lot of shows, especially cartoon shows like from yesteryear, that were dope or that should have changed everything and didn't, or are remembered and beloved for good reason. But the Batman animated series is one of those shows that's just like it grabs hold of you, and then if you get into a creative field like comics, for example, it's funny how it kind of like incepted itself, where you read the comics and you're like, well, this isn't the character I know. Like, why is Mr. Freeze a joke? Or why isn't Man-Bat scary?
I had a hard time with Catwoman not having blonde hair. Right. And the reason that she had blonde hair is because Batman Returns and
Michelle Pfeiffer.
Thank you. Yeah. And I admit having black hair makes a lot more sense for Batgirl, but I still can't wrap my head around it because I'm just so used to the blonde. Which doesn't make sense. I mean, I get why but the introduction stays with you, and it's hard to get over what you like knew for years and years.
Are there a couple of glaring things where you're like, that's not like the show?
The Catwoman costume in the mid '90s was purple with the really long black hair. And I really like the gray and black hair and the blonde hair, the gray and black suit. The comic was a lot darker, of course. This was when they had it wasn't Azrael yet. It was coming up in Azrael, I think, and they were doing I forget what it's called, but they had these black diamonds, and you would squeeze it, and it would turn you into an over-muscled, ragey like giant, and they would beat the shit out of each other. Eclipso.
I see. Yes. Okay.
Yeah, that was the first comic of Batman I got. It was Eclipso, and I was like, this is really dark compared to the cartoon, and it was. Of course, it was darker than the cartoon.
Yeah, of course, as it has to be. Yeah. I remember. Oh, God.
No, go ahead.
I was going to say, as a kid, I remember seeing the Bane episode, which is from the New Adventures, and expecting it to reflect the comic, because, of course, Nightfall had taken over everything. And instead, Batman dispatches Bane in kind of like of course. Yeah. Like, it just circumvents Nightfall in such a, like, obvious way that is just like, oh, that's so amazing. Why didn't he do that? And I remember telling my comic book store owner, I was like, hey, how come they didn't do Nightfall with the cartoon? And he's like, yeah, they're going to have Bane crack Batman's back on a cartoon show for children. And I'm like, I don't know. I mean, they did it in the comic book. I'm reading the comic book. They cracked his back. He's bleeding everywhere. And he's like, yeah, TV and comics are a little different. And I'm like, oh, okay.
Yeah, you're not wrong, man. I remember watching that episode thinking, are they going to do it? I know that, I mean, you needed to have a shot where Bane has Batman over his head.
Yes,
his knees, but and they did do that. But the last minute, he cuts the little tube out of his head, and then that's it. And even as a kid, I'm like, well, I guess they can't break Batman's back on a kid show,
right?
Even though we could have handled it, we were like 15, we were fine.
Yeah, we could have handled it at that point. Absolutely. I mean, I was reading Nightfall at the time, like, well, I've already seen it, so for me, it's old hat.
Yeah.
Now, how about the influence on your own interpretation of Batman?
Yeah, I mean, this is it. I mean, I come more from this universe than for White Knight.
Right.
Some of it's out of laziness too. Like, I didn't want to read a bunch of comics to try to catch myself up on why, because it might have ruined my idea. But I remember watching the animated series and thinking, man, I think Joker, if he could just stop being crazy, he could probably beat Batman, because I think in some ways he's smarter than Batman. And in a way, Batman's lucky that Joker is insane and is in his own way, and his ego takes over. Because, like, imagine a Joker that was calm, collected, smart, and just used legal ways to take Batman down. Exactly. And I've been playing with that idea since I was like 15. So when I got to do White Knight, I'm like, well, this is what I'm going to do.
Yeah.
And the only clinch was the thing was you had to have a Joker that was toned down and not violent. Like, you can't. Joker, in my book, basically gets his criminal record wiped out because of technicalities, and some of the city starts to accept him again and see him as a victim. That only works if Joker never really got caught, you know?
Right. Yeah.
If you have Joker literally wearing people's faces and murdering, then my story doesn't work. So that's like the biggest ask that I need from my reader when it comes to White Knight. If you're good with that, then the rest of it generally tracks.
Oh, absolutely. And using the animated series version, or at least having a toe in that world, helps to kind of legitimize it or make that more palatable, because you're like, I mean, I never see him really kill anybody on that show, but there's horror implied, and implied horror allows you to skirt around a lot of those issues,
Right. Yeah. Like anyone who's gassed and smiling in the cartoon, it's curable. In a movie, that means that person's dead, or in the comics, that person's dead. So totally. I'm kind of going off of that logic. But yeah, if you're really admired in traditional Batman logic, then White Knight might be a bit of a curveball for you at first.
Definitely.
Do you think this cartoon is actually as good as we think it is, or do you think it's just the one at the time? And 5 years from now, the Batman will be the one everyone thinks of, or Brave and the Bold?
Right, which is a great show, by the way. I really enjoy that show. Yeah, it's funny. I caught that and I was like, oh god, here we go. Because for me, the Batman animated series is like the highest echelon. Every time they try to do it, I remember that CG show, The Batman. There was that other The Batman show. No, that was Beware the Batman. I'm thinking of. Well, anyway, I'm like, no, pass.
You had like reggae Joker with long dreadlocks, right?
Yes, exactly.
Which one was that?
That was The Batman.
Okay.
Which actually ended up kind of being cool.
Yeah.
If I had given it half a chance.
And which one was CGI?
That was Beware the Batman.
I thought that one was pretty good. I like that they went with B and C level villains.
Right.
They used like Mr. Pig and characters that I didn't know anything about.
No.
But I was in college, I was too busy. I was getting late, whatever, drinking.
Right.
Like we all were, right, fellas?
Yeah, high five. But yes, it's true. Like I at that point I'd moved on. But did you watch Batman Beyond?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. Because I feel like there's a little bit of an influence on that in some of your White Knight and later on sequels as well.
Yeah, I'm literally. My next Batman book is gonna have Batman Beyond in it. So yeah, I have not. Awesome. So spoilers. And I haven't actually officially announced it yet, but I'll just tell you for your viewers is Volume 3 is going to be Beyond the White Knight. Again, it hasn't officially been whatever. So if people don't talk about it on Twitter, it's probably better. But free will. Yeah. But yeah, so that's what I'm working on now, and actually started reviewing all the old Beyond stuff and trying to come up with a Derek Powers that was a little bit more nuanced than just a capitalist, and trying to play with Terry in a new way.
What matters is the retcon, right? If you call it the Justice League episode where they're like, oh, actually, his father is Bruce Wayne. It's like, oh. Yeah,
that can go either way with people.
Yes, I agree. Yeah. I agree. For me, I was just hungry for more, so I was just like, yeah. But now, 10 years removed, I'm like, is that good? Is that a good retcon? I don't really know.
Yeah, I don't know about that. It was a good episode, but I think I prefer him not being related to Bruce, because I don't like the idea in any universe when all the characters just seem to be related to each other.
Yeah.
Like in all of Star Wars, everyone's related to Luke, Leia, Han Solo, and
Everyone's a
Obi-Wan.
Skywalker.
Yeah, it's like, come on, guys. How about you have a character that's just not related to anybody? You know?
Yeah, and the universe still gives them a chance to have a story.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, no, I also appreciate like the Terry origin. I mean, but for me, that's intrinsic to Batman, where it's like Batman is an orphan, Batman adopts, and then brings from outside and gives them a whole other reality. But
I can't tell if Beyond is more influenced by Spider-Man 299 by Ronin, that comic that Frank Miller did.
Yep.
I mean, cyberpunk's always been a thing. I know that, but I'm curious, like, where it came from. If they had literally pitched it as Batman Blade Runner, then that makes sense. That's what it looks like.
It does. From what I remember about the backstory, basically they were just like young Batman. Like the studio was like, give us a young Batman, and he's like, and they're like, well, there's 1,000 stories about like next generations of Batman. Just usually they're set in the 40s, and they're called Batman 2, and it's silly. And they had to like they had a significant time crunch. They just kind of went, well, it's the future. Like we're not going to throw away our continuity. We're just going to say it's like, you know, however many 50 years in the future. And I kind of love the purity of the desperation. Like for me, comics, TV, media, I love when there's like opposition and crunch time. I know that that's like the worst thing for a creative, but I think that from adversity you get some of things you would never have gotten from like comfort, you know, from a place of ease, and you know, just make whatever you want, and you have unlimited time. Whereas, you know, it's funny, as a kid I wish it didn't bother me, but it always did throw me off. I'm like, all right, so let me get this straight. Season 1, Bruce Wayne is watching black and white TV as a kid. I think there's a lot of black and white TV still in Gotham, and I like that. But however, Bruce is surviving till his 80s, so he goes from black and white TV to flying cars. In 180 years, like, I don't know about that, but it's cool enough where it's like, just go with it. Well, that's the thing. I love the time element of both shows, because they have like Studebagers and Packards. They drive these big, you know, 6,000 pound cars and use black and white TVs that only have one dial. And yet they also have like computers and grapple guns. Like it's just this weird amalgam of time where it's like it's yesterday, but today. So Batman Beyond, same thing, where it's like it can't be 1,000 years in the future when we probably would have flying cars. But let's just you know what, Kryptonian technology and whatever, however you want to justify it. But
it's comic book science. It makes sense.
Exactly.
If something is sufficiently cool, you can give some kind of logic behind it, then I think readers will generally go for it.
I think you're right. I think certainly that's the success of White Knight, and that universe is like, you know, so
just
make it look cool.
So here, speaking of Blade Runner, so I have the spinner car from Blade Runner, which is actually a model, and then I designed my own Batman Batmobile too, from the Beyond. And if you see, like, so this is my design, but it's not that different from what you saw in the cartoon, right?
Right.
And if you look at like the shape of, turn it the right way. Yeah, the shape of the thing, the two things reaching forward, like you can tell that Batman Beyond is definitely going off of Blade Runner in a lot of ways. You know? Yeah. Don't think I didn't notice your Blade Runner poster too. I was gonna get to that. Yeah, I gotta name drop Blade Runner wherever I can.
Listen, Blade Runner is it's one of those perfect movies.
Yeah, it depends on which version you're talking about, but yeah, it's funny because people are always like defending or attacking Blade Runner, and there's like 3 different versions. Not even the main actor and the director can agree on whether the main character is a robot. I mean, it is kind of a beautiful mess in a lot of ways. All
right, what's your version? Is it director, ultimate, or theatrical?
Oh, no voiceover.
Mm-hmm.
No. So I don't know which that one would be. I think it might be the director's cut.
Yeah,
might be my favorite. What about you?
I think you're right. I think the director's cut's my way, because I don't know if I don't like definitively knowing whether Deckard is a replicant, but I do like everything else about that movie. Yeah.
And the sequel too, I love, because they tease that question and they still don't give you an answer, which I think is very good.
Yeah. You know, bringing it back to the Batman animated series,
please.
They clearly do love Blade Runner, because there's at least 2 episodes about replicants. They call them duplicants in the show.
Right. Duplicants.
Yeah, with Hardak. And I think they cast the robot guy as
Yeah.
the scientist.
Yeah, Shannon Shelby. What's his name? I'll think of it in a bit. But yeah, the same voice actor who gets in trouble with the replicants.
Yes.
Sebastian, that's his name.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, that actor.
William Sanderson. Yeah.
Somebody is screaming. There you go. Thank you. Yeah, that's definitely there. I mean, how can you be in film and not eventually want to reference some of those movies? You know, like I'm sure there's as many Godfather references that we're not catching. You know.
Oh, they're everywhere.
Yeah.
That gets me to another question I want to ask you, which is because I'll go with my first, which is what's your favorite episode of the animated series? Mine is His Silicon Soul, which is the second part where the Batman robot shows up.
Right. When he goes like, "I took a life," and he breaks down because he broke his morality. Yeah. Yeah. As a kid, that's when it registered with me. Oh, Batman's really serious about not killing.
Right.
And then in the Michael Keaton versions, he's killing quite often.
He
and
just
then
has
in
guns
Ben
in the
Affleck, and it's funny. Like 3 years ago, or whenever Snyder started doing Batman, there was this big debate over should Batman have guns, and I'm like, why is this a debate? Obviously, he doesn't. Like that's the point of the character.
Yeah.
And then Snyder's like, oh come on, if you're going to be an anti-terrorist, how could you not be, packing major hardware and murdering everybody left and right? I'm like, okay, yeah, this is the guy that's going to direct it. Great.
Right. Yeah. Well, what's the point of working out then if you're just gonna be packing like 17 different guns and drive your car through everything? But
Yeah. My favorite episode. Well, I think Heart of Ice is the easy answer, but I'm gonna give you a more unique one. I really liked POV. Which is kind of a Rashomon style setup where you have this crime that happened and you have these interviews with the cops, with three cops, and they each have different versions of what's going on. You have a very conservative version, you have a very liberal version, and then you have middle version.
Yep.
And I just thought that was really brilliant. And visually, they do some really great fire lit Batman. In some of these episodes, he's sort of orangish. And in this episode and in the Grey Ghost one, it's like orange and red palettes all over the place, and it looks so beautiful. Like if they released a animated series statue that was fire lit, I would definitely buy that.
Seriously, no.
Yeah.
That's one of those shows where I notice that kind of thing. You watch other shows and you're just kind of like, the story, but Batman the Animated Series is one of those shows where you're you notice lighting, camera angles, effects and positions of body, and you're because you've never seen it before, your brain is just trying to acclimate itself, and you're enjoying this immersive story.
Right.
But it's funny how the show has continued. I think going back to your old question about, do people, is it as good as we remember? Yes. I think it is as good as we remember because as an adult, I can watch it. And it's there are some shows and movies where you watch it as a kid and it's perfect, and then you grow up and you're like, okay, let's be real here for a second. This isn't exactly amazing, but it's amazing to me.
Yeah, looking at you, He-Man.
For me, I think it's the Ninja Turtles movie from '90, where I'm just like,
that holds up.
I think it holds up too. I have a friend who's much younger who's like, it does not, and I'm like, okay,
oh, it does. Oh, come on! It's about peer pressure and broken families, and there's some serious shit going on in that movie. Being brainwashed and being de-brainwashed. There's a movie that still has the #1 sales of indie independent movie ever, or something like that, right?
Yeah. That's,
and it's funny when Transformers came out with Michael Bay. I remember thinking, I don't like it. I can't tell what is an arm and a leg on a Transformer. It just looks like a pile of garbage punching itself going across the highway in LA.
Absolutely.
And someone fires back and they're like, well, it's a story about big robots. I mean, what do you want? And I go, well, Ninja Turtles was about Ninja Turtles in 1990, and it still managed to actually say something. You telling, I know they're giant robots, but you still can't make some kind of morality play or anything that's more resonant than just big piles of garbage punching each other.
Right. Yeah, because at the end of the day, all of these stories that we enjoy about Batman, Ninja Turtles, comic books are morality plays in their own right.
Yeah.
And Transformers used to be that. It's a toy commercial, but I mean, at least Optimus Prime was good, don't hurt people, don't take drugs.
Right.
I guess there's something there.
Yeah, or the Bumblebee movie, I think was the best Transformer movie, and it was like, you know, the Iron Giant, which is a pretty traditional script, but who cares? Like, they still managed to say a lot about families and friendships and romance and coming of age. Like, yeah, you still have the big robots in there, but you still had a really good script too.
Yeah, no, Iron Giant's tight. So yeah, I guess just when it comes to this show, it's funny. It's just more like we're just talking about stuff, which is fine with me. I'm happy to just talk about Blade Runner.
So it's funny. I wrote to Paul Dini. So I know I never met Paul face to face, but I mean, obviously I know who he is. And on Twitter, when he retweeted me once, I got really excited. And you know, having like made it to a pretty high level in comics, there's very little that still gets me excited. But Paul Dini writing to me was pretty exciting. And I was chatting with him offline, and I'm like, man, I don't know if I have to say this, but like your writing and what you and Bruce did, it's just made my life. Like, if you ever thought, you know, one day some little kid is going to watch these cartoons, one day that kid's going to grow up and he's going to be the next Batman. I'm like, that's me. I'm that guy. Like, I was the kid. This is all basically for me to get here with White Knight. And he's like, well, I can tell that you really like Harley. I really appreciate your treatment of her. And as a thank you, he sent me a cell animation of Harley.
No way.
I don't know where it is. Yeah, it's like her and Poison Ivy, like an actual Warner Brothers store, you know, cell shaded animation. And it's one of my favorite things. And yeah, you know, it's funny. There's not a lot of writers that I would want to work with because I mostly just do it myself. But if I had to pick, I would say a Paul Dini one shot would be pretty cool.
Yeah. I would love to read that. I feel like it would be a Harley story, but yeah.
Why not? Yeah. And I met Bruce Timm once too at a show, and you know, I think Bruce has off and on days, and I think he was just getting a little exhausted by the crowd, and that's fine. Like, I'm not always on either. And I could tell he was a little bit low energy sitting behind his table at San Diego. And Dave Johnson, our mutual friend, introduced me, and I was like, do I fanboy out, or do I say do I give him like a cool, like, oh man, really like that cartoon you did? Yeah. And I did it somewhere in the middle, and he's like, oh yeah, thanks. He just like let it drop. I'm like, okay, so now what do I say? And I go, that episode with the Gray Ghost, was that you doing the voice of that character? And he goes, he goes, I actually did a lot of the voices in this series. I'm like, oh yeah, of course you did. Of course, why wouldn't I know that? I mean, you know, and I actually didn't know that, but I could have just gone on Wikipedia and figured it out for myself. But like, I didn't know what else to ask him in that moment because he just sat there silently looking at me.
Yeah, I had a similar experience with Bruce Timm. He seems like he's very busy, and you know, he gets the, you know, it's funny. It's one of those things where it's literally just like, well, you made the best show ever, so you know, whatever you want, man.
I don't care. Yeah,
right, exactly.
You earned it. It's like when people get mad at James Cameron for Avatar. It's like James Cameron has contributed to sci-fi in more ways than anyone. Like, he's allowed to do whatever the hell he wants in it.
Exactly. I'll
got nothing to apologize for. Yeah.
No, make Avatar 4, 5, and 6. As long as you don't unmake Aliens and The Abyss, I guess I'm good.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm not going to argue with that. Yeah, no, I would still. It's like what? Yeah, I'll still meet him. Like I'd still shake his hand and hug him and everything.
Yeah. Those people that are so talented, they're allowed to be a dick, and it's okay. I mean, within reason, I guess.
I think, dick versus abusive. You know, like
Like, if there's a Harvey Weinstein story about one of these guys, and maybe that's not obviously.
Oh no! Well, I just mean like being a complete like asshole, where it's just like just laying into somebody because they're just innocently a fan of your work. It's like, dude, chill. But if they're just aloof, it's like, well, you're an artist. You get aloofness I get from artists. But yeah, man. Well, thanks for talking to me about Batman and Blade Runner and Terminator. We didn't get a chance to really talk about Terminator, but I feel like we talk about that for an hour.
When you have a Terminator podcast, let me know. I'll be there.
Dude,
I mean, honestly, T2. When I saw that movie, I'm like, this makes me want to write, because I don't think that this is Amadeus. I don't think it's Shakespeare.
No.
But I think if it's good enough, it's got cool ideas, and it's got nice action scenes. And I thought, well, if I ever want to write my own comics, I don't have to be the best. I just have to, I want to write something like equivalent to T2, where it's like a lot of action, some good ideas, decent dialogue. That's all you need.
Yeah.
I joke around with this, but I say, if everyone in comics was Ernest Hemingway, I would never try to write. But, you know, there's a lot of hit and miss comics out there, and I don't consider myself a great writer, but if I can at least do like a T2 level script, every now and then I'm happy. So yeah, T2 to me, that means a lot to me, that movie.
Yeah, for me, that is my Shakespeare. Like I do, like I appreciate Shakespeare, but like when it's that kind of thing, that's my Shakespeare. Where it's like that's a tight script, kismet in terms of casting and cinematography, and you know, and it's not just cool. You know, like Predator is awesome, right? It's a Predator is one of those movies where it's like it's perfect and it's like lock tight, no question. Nothing. You pull one thread, the whole thing falls apart, but you can't because there's no threads to be had. But with Terminator, it's so big and there's so many things going on, and they're also innovating. Like they also changed the system, right? Like it's not just like, oh, it's cool and tight, but it's also like, let's push technology and effects and what we can accomplish with CG and with practical animation. It's like, oh, like you've managed to hit all the notes.
On so many levels, I'm jealous of people who have never seen that movie. Imagine going into that the first time and you legit don't know who's a good guy. Schwarzenegger or Robert Patrick, because one of them is dressed like a cop and one's dressed like a villain, and then oh my god, the last minute Arnold grabs John and protects him, and it's like, oh my god. I mean, my head. And the thing is, that movie got so much press that everyone knew going in that Arnold was going to be the good guy. Nobody really got to experience it, but I wish that I could erase that part of my brain and watch it for the first time. Like, oh my god, Arnold's a good guy this time.
Every time I see that scene, I think the same thing. I think, man, I wish this wasn't ruined by like the trailer 30 years ago.
Damn it, James Cameron. I am mad at you.
Yeah, no. But Sean, thanks so much for being here. And listen, ladies and gentlemen, if you haven't already watched the animated series, at least watch the first 3 seasons. That show has an influence on the character that people still feel today. People look at like characters. I can never just voice acting, animation, and character distillation that are still being felt today. Just the influence of Phantasm and everything. It's just there's so much. It's so big that it's hard to distill. But
actually, I have a podcast on YouTube with my friend Clay, and we call it Badass, Battass, and it's about Batman the Animated Series podcast. And we just started, we're halfway through season 4 right now, but if you're looking for more content right now, I mean, obviously you should watch this channel first. But go look, Sean, go look at the Badass podcast and you'll see it.
Yeah. Well, I definitely will.
Talk about T2 and Blade Runner a lot in that podcast too, I'm sure.
That's good. Normally that's me. Normally that's my fault, but I'm happy to see that that's actually, I can blame somebody else for that derailment this time around.
Nope, it's my fault. Absolutely.
Well, listen, but it's funny. You drop any one of those things, and I'm like, oh, I'll pick that up. Yep, I'm in. Oh, we're talking about that now. Okay.
That's the problem. You and I are in a bar together. Someone's going to have to stop us and remind us, like, guys, the bar's closing. You can't talk about Blade Runner the whole night.
Exactly. Well, all right. I guess I'll call you tomorrow. Like, yeah. Well, thank you for being here, and thanks for watching, and we'll see you guys next time with another episode. So long, everybody.